Why do they keep trying to make it a rap beef between you and Gotti, though?
If it's something about you I just don't respect, bro, I can't sit and fake and act like it's all good.
That's understandable.
Know what I'm saying? Right. Like the first time I even met little dude, you ain't like Zilla. I ain't gotta hold your hand like Zilla. You ain't like Starlito. I ain't gotta hold your hand like Starlito. I ain't gotta babysit you like them. It's my first time meeting you. You gonna really sit and downplay your artists and throw your artists up on the bus to try to persuade me in to come over there?
Hey guys, welcome back to BuzzBuster. The movement surrounding Dolph hasn't faded at all. If anything, the loyalty around his name still feels powerful, and no one has represented that more clearly than Key Glock. From the very beginning, Glock was right there. Dolph wasn't just a mentor in music. Their connection ran deeper than business, deeper than rap. He was family. And over time, that bond became something even stronger, more like true brotherhood than anything else. Because of that, Dolph's death didn't just affect Key Glock on the surface, it shook him in a serious way. After it happened, he stepped completely out of view. His social media went dark. He pulled away from the spotlight. Memphis was no longer where he wanted to be, at least for a while, and he vanished from public view as he tried to deal with the weight of everything. For fans watching from the outside, it was obvious this wasn't some promotional move or temporary break. It looked like someone trying to process a loss that changed everything.
Feeling, how you holding up?
I'm content. I'm all right.
When you say content, what does that mean? Like
I'm maintaining. Like I'm not getting better. I'm not getting worse. I'm just here right now.
Eventually, though, Glock returned with a different energy. Once he resurfaced, he came back intense, focused, and unapologetic. The music started speaking for him. Through those records, he took direct aim at people he believed were connected to what happened to Dolph. A lot of that attention centered on Yo Gotti and the camp around him. He didn't stop at vague shots either. Some of the lyrics were seen as him mocking setbacks and tragedies tied to the other side, which only added more fuel to an already tense situation. That's a big reason people have continued speculating about whether Yo Gotti could eventually respond in some way. Those rumors haven't gone away, mostly because Key Glock has shown no sign of retreating. He hasn't softened his tone, he hasn't tried to distance himself from what he said. If anything, he stayed firm, and that refusal to back down has kept the conversation alive.
To understand why Key Glock moves the way he does, it helps to look at where he came from. His story, much like young Dolph's, did not begin with comfort or stability. Before the name, before the fame, before the change, the cars, and the sold-out crowds, there was a kid growing up in South Memphis facing real hardship from the start. Marcavius Cathy, the artist now known to the world as Key Glock, was barely even old enough to understand life when it began testing him.
You remember how you found out and where you were?
Never forget, yep.
Where were you at?
I was at home. Laying down, actually. Yep.
And did somebody call you, or?
Somebody called me in the house. Like, you know how you can hear when somebody call your name, like the tone of their voice, like you know something wrong, you just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
His earliest years were marked by separation and instability. When he was just 16 months old, his mother, Tamika Cathy, also known as Mama Glock, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. That's not the kind of absence a child can make sense of, but it leaves a mark anyway. At an age when most kids are only beginning to form memories, one of the most important figures in his life was suddenly taken away. His father wasn't a reliable presence either. According to the story told about Glock's upbringing, he moved in and out of the picture and was never truly there in a consistent way. That kind of environment can create a deep sense of uncertainty early on. No stable foundation, no dependable rhythm, just a childhood shaped by absence, struggle, and having to adapt faster than most people ever should. Still, the way Mama Glock is remembered in his story says a lot. Even with everything stacked against her, she was seen as someone determined to do whatever it took for her son. The image that comes through isn't one of indifference, it's the opposite. She's described as solid, committed, and driven by survival. Her whole mindset was about making sure her child had what he needed, no matter what she had to do to try to provide it.
I was like, it's your fault that you're not with me. Like I was just basically just growing up and maturing, but I was still like a kid. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I'm having football games. I got shit at school. I'm seeing niggas, mamas and daddies pulling up, you know what I'm saying, and supporting. Like,
that background matters because it helps explain the toughness people now associate with Key Glock. His public image didn't come out of nowhere. The guarded personality, the loyalty, the refusal to fold under pressure, all of it feels tied to a life that demanded resilience from the very beginning. Losing Dolph only added another heavy layer to a story that was already filled with pain, struggle, and emotional weight. So when people see Glock standing firm now, they're not just looking at an artist keeping a feud alive. They're looking at someone shaped by loss long before fame ever arrived. Someone who learned early that people can disappear, that stability isn't guaranteed, and that loyalty means everything when you come from a place where so much can be taken from you. Doing hair out of the kitchen had stopped being enough, so she started making money in the streets. In the beginning, everything seemed manageable. For a while, it looked like she had found a way to stay afloat. Still, street life always comes with a cost, and sooner or later, that price showed up. During one move she made with a few of the women around her, things went wrong. She got caught off guard, was arrested, and ended up facing time with no bond.
I'm one of the star players and shit, but like, it's cool how my grandma putting up, but it's like, I wanted that feeling of my mother to see the shit. Like, I didn't know about no state and beds and stuff at that young of an age, bro. Like, I just knew I had to go visit her every week or every other week.
Just like that, everything changed. With both of his parents no longer around, Glock was left without the kind of support most kids depend on. That could have broken everything, but his grandmother refused to let him fall completely. Much like Holloway, she stepped in when the family needed someone most. She took on the responsibility of raising him and did everything in her power to give him stability. Even so, there was only so much protection she could offer. A grandmother can provide love, guidance, and shelter, but she cannot erase the environment waiting outside the front door.
Before long, the streets had already started pulling at him. That influence came early and stayed close. By the time Glock was only 6 years old, he was already around weapons. That detail alone says everything about the world he was growing up in. This was not something distant or occasional. It was part of daily life, woven into his surroundings so deeply that it became normal before he was even old enough to understand what normal should look like. Classrooms did not give him much peace either. School became another place where the pressure showed itself. He acted out, pushed boundaries, and clashed with teachers. To outsiders, it may have looked like simple bad behavior. Looking closer, it was the response of a child trying to make sense of a life filled with instability, absence, and constant pressure.
How difficult was it growing up without her while she was doing that time?
And like, it made me though. It was hard, but it made me. So I made it through that. I feel like I can make it through that. I can make it through anything. You know what I'm saying? Like,
kids carry more than people realize, and in his case, that weight was heavy from the very beginning. Even with all of that stacked against him, he never stopped holding it down for Mama Glock. That loyalty stayed with him. While outside influences kept trying to pull him in one direction, he was also starting to build a reputation of his own. People around him were beginning to know his name. There was already something about him that stood out. What makes the story even more interesting is that music was not the original plan. At first, that path was not even on his radar. He was not sitting around dreaming of studios, records, or rap success. Those ideas came later. The shift started when he was exposed to artists who carried a sound and presence too powerful to ignore. Once he discovered names like 3 6 Mafia, Lil Wayne, and Gucci Mane, something clicked.
Their music opened a different door. It showed him another way to speak on what he had seen, what he had survived, and what was happening around him. More importantly, it gave shape to feelings and experiences that had been building for years. The same environment that had been hardening him was now giving him material, perspective, and a voice.
When was your early connections to hip-hop, and when did you feel like I definitely think I want to rap? Like, what was those early moments with that?
I never planned on actually rapping, wanted to be a rapper.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, we'll be at lunch, everybody just freestyling, and that shit led from lunch tables to my homeboy in-house studio to a real studio.
That is what makes this part of his story so important. He was not coming from comfort.
He was not being guided down a clean, easy road. He was raised in the middle of chaos, forced to adapt early, and exposed to realities most kids should never have to face. Yet somewhere inside all of that confusion, another possibility began to form. His grandmother gave him the foundation she could. The streets gave him pressure. School reflected his struggle. Life kept testing him at every turn. Still, the seeds of something bigger were quietly being planted. Long before music became a career, it was becoming an outlet. Long before people knew him for records, he was just a young kid trying to survive circumstances that would have overwhelmed a lot of grown people. That combination of pain, loyalty, and influence became the setup for everything that came next. Once those musical legends entered the picture, the direction of his life began to shift in a way nobody could have fully predicted. A spark had already taken hold, and with each year, it burned stronger. In 2013, while he was still in middle school, he released his first official song, Acting. That was an early sign of where his path was heading, but the weight he carried never really left him. Watching other kids grow up with their parents nearby, while he had to go without, stayed with him. It was a quiet hurt, but a deep one.
Everything shifted on April 16, 2014, when Mama Glock finally returned home. That moment meant more than words could really explain. For him, it wasn't just a reunion. It was relief, healing, and a sense of wholeness he had been missing for a long time. The emptiness he had lived with started to fade, and that emotional boost pushed him in a new direction. After that, music became a much bigger focus. He began taking it more seriously, putting more energy into his sound and his future. Even with that growing passion though, his surroundings still pulled at him. The street life hadn't fully loosened its hold, and balancing both worlds was far from easy.
I don't force it. I don't force it.
Yeah.
No lie. I don't force nothing. Like I just let it happen.
Trouble nearly knocked everything off course when he turned 18. In March 2016, as he was putting together his tape, Whole Lotta Air, he was arrested in connection with a nightclub incident in Memphis. 3 people were hurt by shrapnel, and he was charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault. What looked like the start of something major in music suddenly became a serious setback. He spent 90 days in jail before returning home. That period forced a change in mindset. Once he got out, he started moving more carefully and becoming more disciplined about the choices around him. The streets were still part of his reality, but his attention was beginning to shift. Music was no longer just something he did on the side. It was starting to look like a real way forward. Even then, he wasn't completely convinced that rapping was meant to be his life. Doubt was still there. Hesitation was still there too. Still, the people around him saw something undeniable. They recognized the raw ability, the presence, and the potential before he fully embraced it himself. Their belief kept pushing him forward, even at a time when he was still figuring out who he wanted to become.
That stretch of his life became a turning point. He had pain from his past, pressure from his environment, and a future that could have gone in more than one direction. Yet through all of it, the music kept calling him back. Step by step, it was becoming less of a hobby and more of a lifeline. Everything changed the moment the timing finally worked in his favor. That was when young Dolph stepped fully into the story. Even though Key Glock and young Dolph were family by blood, Glock never moved like someone trying to benefit from Dolph's success. He wasn't looking for shortcuts, favors, or an easy path. From the beginning, his mindset was built around doing things on his own and proving he could stand on his own name. Still, Dolph recognized something real in him. He saw the drive, the discipline, and the hunger to become more than just a relative with potential.
From your perspective, though, when you look at him as an artist, right? Like, what do you think it was that made him so special? How do you personally view his musical legacy?
I don't even look at him as an artist. It ain't even about the music. Like, dude's just a genuine, you know what I'm saying?
The person.
Good energy, good-hearted person. Like,
Yeah.
and you can't beat that. You can't fake that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Because of that, Dolph chose to open the door and help Glock sharpen his path. It wasn't about giving him a free ride. It was about showing guidance to somebody who was already putting in the effort. After that, the momentum took off fast. Glock started picking up everything he could, learning the business, studying the craft, and putting serious work behind his rise. The results started showing almost immediately. One release after another kept building his reputation and pushing his name further.
Projects like Glock Season, Glock Bond, Glaucoma, Son of a Gun, and Yellow Tape 2 made it clear he wasn't just around because of who he was related to. He was earning his place.
What made the whole run even bigger was the chemistry between him and Dolph. Together, they created a partnership that felt impossible to ignore. When they linked up on records, the energy was undeniable. Collaborations like Dumb and Dumber and Dumb and Dumber 2 became major moments. The kind of music people played loud and remembered. Their connection on tracks felt natural, almost effortless, and fans could tell it was built on real trust. For Glock, this was the vision becoming reality. He was no longer just chasing the dream, he was living it. Every move started carrying more weight, not only for himself, but for his city and for the people who had been watching him from the beginning. He was stepping onto bigger stages, commanding bigger crowds, and making it clear that his name belonged in the conversation. Live performances became another sign of how far things had come. Whether it was major festival appearances like Rolling Loud or packed out shows where the crowd knew every word, Glock brought the kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. Once he hit the stage, the reaction spoke for itself. The energy was high, the support was real, and it showed that his rise wasn't hype. It was something solid. In a lot of ways, Glock carried the same spirit people respected in Dolph. Both of them moved with confidence, but never came off disconnected. No matter how much attention they got or how big their careers became, they still gave off that grounded, relatable energy. Fame didn't seem to pull them away from who they were at the core. That loyalty to where they came from stayed visible the whole time. Memphis wasn't just a place attached to their names. It was part of their identity, part of their story, and part of what made people connect to them so strongly. They wore that hometown pride naturally, and it showed in how they moved, how they spoke, and how they represented themselves.
At the same time, being humble never meant being weak. Having a good heart didn't mean they were naive, and staying real didn't mean they were easy to play with. That balance was part of what made Glock stand out. He could be calm, focused, and respectful while still carrying himself with the kind of edge that made people take him seriously. By this point, it was obvious he wasn't simply following in Dolph's footsteps. He was building something of his own while still honoring the bond they shared. That's what made the story hit harder. You had family, loyalty, hard work, and talent all coming together at the right time. And once that spark caught, there was no slowing it down. People had the wrong idea about him. Quiet didn't mean weak, and anyone who mistook his calm attitude for fear was taking a real risk. That became obvious once things heated up with CMG affiliate Lil Migo. What started as online shots turned into a non-stop back and forth. Posts, insults, tension, and public disrespect kept piling up until it stopped looking like simple internet drama.
There gotta be some shit in the earth, cause you nigga hoes! Every nigga that wake up on some hoe shit and hit my phone on some hoe shit or tell me some hoe shit, I'm smacking the fuck at you. I don't give a fuck who you is. Nigga, I see you niggas everywhere. You niggas put y'all fucking head down. You niggas hold. I put this on God, nigga. I got 100, you ain't gonna do a show in the city. Bitch ass nigga. And I ain't never diss you niggas. I don't speak on you niggas. I don't think about you hoe ass nigga. You niggas gay, man. I swear to God, nigga. Y'all
The situation grew so intense that people were openly talking about keeping certain individuals out of parts of the city and pushing the conflict beyond social media. At that point, this wasn't just entertainment for fans watching from the sidelines. It was starting to feel personal, local, and unpredictable. Glock, though, never gave the impression that he was about to retreat. Backing down wasn't really part of his image, and he made it clear he was prepared to face whatever came with that pressure. While all of that was unfolding, he still stayed active and kept moving like nothing was going to slow him down.
Another major source of tension came from his ongoing issues with CMG's Black Youngster. To understand why that mattered so much, you have to look at the history behind it. Dolph had deep-rooted problems with both Black Youngster and Yo Gotti, and those conflicts weren't minor disagreements. The situation had already gone to a dangerous level, with Dolph surviving 2 attempts on his life. That history changed everything. Because of that, Glock's position was never going to be neutral. His loyalty to Dolph ran too deep for that. He wasn't about to overlook what had happened or pretend the past didn't matter. Every time the pressure rose, he stayed solid and made it clear where he stood.
For him, it wasn't just rap politics or industry drama. It was about standing by someone he considered family from the very beginning. Even with all the outside noise, he kept his momentum going. The music stayed strong, his name kept buzzing, and he continued building his presence. Still, trouble found its way back in 2019, right after he delivered a standout performance at Rolling Loud. It should have been one of those moments that simply added to his rise, another big appearance that showed he was becoming impossible to ignore. Instead, it quickly turned into a legal setback. Authorities arrested Glock and charged him with carrying a concealed weapon along with possession of more than 20 grams of marijuana. In Florida, both charges were treated as serious felonies, which instantly made the situation far more serious than a routine run-in. Suddenly, the focus shifted from the performance to the case, and his momentum was once again being tested by problems off stage. His bond was set at $17,500. For some artists, a situation like that can derail everything. Momentum fades, headlines change, and the narrative starts writing itself. Glock, however, didn't let that moment define him.
It's like once you go to jail, bro, and see how they treat you, you know what I'm saying? No matter the charge, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you go in there motherfucker for a speeding ticket, they finna still treat you like you just murdered somebody. Like, it ain't no, you know what I'm saying? No levels to this shit. Like, if you in there, you just gotta deal with it. But it's like, that shit ain't for a dog. I see why they be saying, man, dogs don't belong in cages. Like,
once he was released, he got right back to work and returned to the grind without wasting time.
That response said a lot about who he was. No matter how much tension surrounded him, whether it was online feuds, street rumors, long-running loyalty issues, or legal pressure, he kept pushing forward. There was always something waiting around the corner, but he never seemed interested in slowing down just to make other people comfortable. That's what made his position so intense during that period. He wasn't just dealing with one problem at a time. Conflict with Lil Migo was already adding heat. The bad blood tied to Black Youngster carried its own weight because of everything connected to Dolph. On top of that, the 2019 arrest created another layer of pressure when his career was still climbing. Yet through all of it, he kept showing the same pattern. Stay loyal, stay active, and don't let outside pressure force a change in direction. For fans watching it all unfold, that stretch of time revealed exactly what Glock was made of. He wasn't loud just for attention, and he wasn't acting tough for headlines. The message was simple. He wasn't someone people could easily push around, and every situation that came at him only reinforced that reputation. Back then, he and Dolph looked like they were enjoying every second of the ride, joking nonstop, moving with confidence, and embracing the kind of success they had earned the hard way. Watching two artists rise from difficult beginnings and still stay true to who they were made their bond stand out even more. Nothing about them felt forced. The chemistry was natural, and the loyalty was obvious. At the same time, Glock was all in with Paper Route Empire, fully committed and helping push the label forward beside Dolph. They were building something that felt bigger than music. Every move made it seem like they were stepping into a new level together, with Glock emerging as a major force, while Dolph remained right there leading the way. It felt like momentum was on their side, and the future looked wide open.
Everything changed on November 17th. That day brought a loss that shook everything around him. Dolph died, and from that moment on, Glock's life was no longer the same. The energy shifted instantly. What had looked like a strong run full of celebration turned into heartbreak almost overnight. For Glock, this was not just another painful headline or a tragedy happening from a distance. It hit at the center of his world. In the aftermath, he pulled away from everything. Social media disappeared. Public appearances stopped. Memphis was behind him for the moment, and he went completely silent. There was no quick statement, no immediate attempt to return to normal, no public performance of strength. He stepped back in a way that showed just how heavy the grief really was. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could, and in his case, it said everything. Later, images surfaced from Dolph's celebration of life, and they told their own story. Glock was seen crying openly, overcome with emotion in a moment that made the depth of the loss impossible to ignore. What viewers were seeing was far more than a rapper reacting to the death of a collaborator. This was personal on a much deeper level. He was not simply grieving a friend in the industry. He was mourning someone he saw as family, someone whose place in his life could never be replaced. For a long stretch, he said very little. That silence had people constantly asking how he was doing, trying to get some kind of update, some kind of reaction, something they could hold on to. Eventually, Glock made it clear that those repeated questions were wearing on him. The pressure of being expected to explain pain in real time clearly reached a breaking point. Grief does not follow a schedule, and it does not become easier just because the public wants answers.
When he finally chose to speak, the message carried real weight. He opened up enough to make one thing unmistakably clear. Dolph's death affected him in a profound way. This was a wound that cut deep and stayed with him. There was no pretending otherwise, no polished statement designed to smooth things over. The pain was real, and he let people see that much. He also found a permanent way to pay tribute. Glock got a tattoo of Dolph, turning memory into something he would carry with him every day. That choice spoke volumes. It was not about a temporary gesture or a tribute made for attention. It was a lasting sign of respect, love, and loyalty. More importantly, he made a promise. He said Dolph's name would never be forgotten, and he committed himself to taking Pre as far as it could go. Since then, he has moved with that mission in mind. Every step has reflected that vow. Rather than letting grief stop everything forever, he turned it into purpose. He kept going, not as if nothing happened, but with the weight of that loss clearly fueling him. There was a difference between moving on and moving forward, and Glock seemed focused on the second one. What makes this chapter hit so hard is how sudden the shift was. One moment it was laughter, success, and two close partners enjoying the life they built. The next, everything was marked by absence. That contrast is what makes the story so emotional. It is also what makes Glock's response mean so much. He did not try to package the pain into something neat. He disappeared when he needed to. He grieved openly when the moment hit him. Then, in time, he returned with a promise to keep Dolph's legacy alive. And from the way he has carried himself since, it is clear that promise was never just words.
Songs like Already Know 2 made it clear the pressure never stopped. The record took direct aim at Gotti and even referenced Big Juke's death in a way that sparked even more attention.
He a hater, you know what I mean? Matter of fact, he my biggest hater. You know what I mean? He wanted to sign me. He wanted me to come over there and let him give me some money, give me a car and all that. Nah, I don't need that. I got my own ice, real ice. You know what I mean? They rocking that fake ice. Like I rock real ice. I be trying not to do too much stunting and flexing and talking too much because I make rappers feel uncomfortable.
Through it all, the message seemed obvious. He wasn't backing away. And in his eyes, the score for Dolph was far from settled. Still, this story goes beyond one artist. According to the talk surrounding Memphis, the city itself kept carrying that anger long after young Dolph was gone. His death hit the community hard. For many people, it wasn't just the loss of a rapper. It felt personal, emotional, and deeply tied to the identity of the city. What came next only intensified that pain. In the weeks that followed, Memphis was overwhelmed by tension. One incident seemed to lead straight into another. Retaliation became the word attached to nearly every new headline, and the atmosphere across the city reportedly changed almost overnight. Streets that were already carrying years of pressure suddenly felt even heavier. Fear spread quickly, and the impact was impossible to ignore. Within the month after Dolph's killing, the situation had escalated to a shocking level. Reports and street accounts suggested that at least 40 people may have lost their lives in incidents connected directly or indirectly to the fallout. Whether every case was tied the same way, the number itself painted a grim picture. Memphis, already known for its struggles, was suddenly being mentioned as one of the most dangerous cities in America. That's what makes this question so haunting. How many lives were changed or ended in the aftermath of young Dolph's death? Once that cycle started, it seemed like more names kept getting added to the list. Each new case deepened the sense that this tragedy had opened the door to something much larger than one crime.
One of the first names frequently mentioned was comedian Darian D. Money Childs. His role in the story came from social media, where he reportedly made jokes about Dolph's death. Online, that kind of post can sometimes be dismissed as trolling, clout chasing, or just reckless commentary meant to get attention for a few days. He may have believed the backlash would stay on the internet and disappear as quickly as it arrived. Memphis, however, has long had a reputation for treating disrespect very differently. In that environment, people often say words can carry consequences far beyond a screen. Posts are remembered, names get noted, grudges don't always fade. That harsh reality gave Child's situation an especially chilling tone. Only about a week after the post, Childs was killed in a shooting. The timing immediately drew attention, and many people began connecting his death to the comments he had made online. Whether viewed as retaliation, a warning, or part of a bigger chain of events,
the case became one more example of how quickly things were spiraling after Dolph's murder. What makes it even more disturbing is how fast the line between online behavior and real-life consequences seemed to disappear. A joke typed out for the internet allegedly turned into a deadly outcome in just days. That transformation added another layer to the fear already hanging over the city. People weren't just reacting to headlines anymore. They were watching a climate where every move, every statement, and every perceived insult carried weight. By that point, Memphis wasn't just grieving a fallen star. The city was dealing with the aftermath of a loss that appeared to trigger wave after wave of fallout. Each story fed into the next. Each incident made the atmosphere darker. And as more names surfaced, one thing became harder to deny. Dolph's death didn't end with one tragedy. For many, it marked the beginning of a much larger and more devastating chain reaction.
Child's killing was one piece of that bigger picture, and it showed just how volatile the moment had become. What started as mourning had, according to many accounts, turned into something far more dangerous. The city was no longer just coping with grief. It was trapped inside the consequences of it. What happened next made it clear this story was far from over. In the months that followed, the fallout from young Dolph's killing seemed to spread wider and wider, with more names entering the conversation under troubling circumstances. One of the biggest names to surface was Big Newski, a rapper connected to Moneybagg Yo and also known as Big 30's cousin. By January 2022, his name had become part of the growing list of incidents people were watching closely. That month, Newski was shot outside the New Horizon River apartments on Ketchum Road at around 7 p.m. When everything was over, the 26-year-old artist had lost his life. Almost immediately, people began asking whether there was more behind it than a chance encounter. Online chatter picked up fast, and street rumors only added more tension. A major reason for that speculation was Newski's reported connection to Justin Johnson, also known as Straight Drop, one of the central figures publicly tied to the investigation into Dolph's death. Soon enough, older images began circulating across social media. In those photos, Newski and Straight Drop appeared together in front of the same vehicle. For many observers, that was enough to intensify the suspicion. It pushed the idea that this incident might not have been isolated and that it could have been part of a larger chain of retaliation already unfolding in the background.
This is how the Memphis rapper Young Dolph got shot. On November 17th, 2021, Young Dolph was right here at Makita's Homemade Cookies. While he was at the bakery, two masked men pulled up in a white Mercedes. They opened fire through the bakery window. Dolph was hit 22 times. He died instantly at the scene. But this is the reason why he got killed. For years, Dolph had been caught in a dangerous rap beef with another Memphis rapper, Yo Gotti.
At that point, the conversation started shifting from individual cases to something bigger. People weren't just reacting to one headline at a time anymore. They were beginning to notice what looked like a pattern. As more incidents happened, the same kinds of alleged connections kept coming up. Many of the names being discussed were said to have links to CMG and Yo Gotti, either through music industry relationships, personal associations, or reported street ties. That detail kept drawing attention because it suggested these events might not be random at all. Whether those links were direct or indirect, they became a major part of the public speculation. Every new development seemed to send people back through old photos, past affiliations, and previous rumors, trying to piece together how everyone might have been connected. The deeper people looked, the more complicated the picture seemed to become. What first appeared to be separate incidents now looked, at least to many watching from the outside, like pieces of the same larger conflict. Names, alliances, and old associations were being re-examined with every new report. That's why Newski's death hit so differently. It wasn't viewed as just another tragic loss. To many, it felt like another sign that the aftermath of Dolph's killing was still unfolding in real time. By then, the atmosphere around the case had changed completely. This was no longer just about one shocking crime. It had become a story filled with suspicion, rumored retaliation, and a growing list of people whose names kept resurfacing under dark circumstances. Each new incident added another layer, and each alleged connection made the situation feel even more intense.
Still, it's important to separate confirmed facts from the wave of speculation that followed. What was known publicly was that Big Newski was killed in January 2022 outside those apartments on Ketchum Road, and that his death immediately drew attention because of his reported association with Straight Drop. Beyond that, much of the conversation was driven by rumor, internet theories, and the public's attempt to make sense of a string of disturbing events. Even so, one thing was hard to ignore. more and more people tied whether loosely or closely to the orbit of this case were ending up in headlines. And as that list grew, so did the belief that something much larger was happening behind the scenes. Their connections, however, went further than most people first realized. Memphis music circles had deep ties to the streets, and more than a few names were reportedly linked to the notorious Trula Mafia. Among the most talked about figures was Joshua Taylor, better known as CEO Teezy. Authorities had long kept him on their radar because of his alleged connection to the killing of young Dolph, and by that point, pressure around his name had only intensified. Everything came to a grim turning point on June 14, 2023. Just before 1 p.m., officers were dispatched to the area of Spotswood Avenue near Bunton Street after a call came in about a man unresponsive inside a vehicle. When police arrived, they found Taylor dead in the car, having suffered multiple gunshot injuries. What made the discovery even more unsettling was what investigators reportedly learned next. According to early reports, he may have been shot the previous night, but his body was not located until the following afternoon. The vehicle was found near a church, adding another eerie layer to an already disturbing scene.
His death became one more chapter in a feud that seemed to keep claiming new names. By then, it was starting to feel less like a series of isolated incidents and more like a relentless chain reaction. Every time it seemed the cycle might finally ease up, another headline proved otherwise. The sense around Memphis was clear. This conflict was far from over. Before the city could even catch its breath, another tragedy pushed that message even further. This time, the victim was an emerging artist with growing attention and a promising future ahead of her. On September 24, 2022, rising female rapper Lafita Cash Desto, whose real name was Destiny Golden, was shot and killed in a case many believed was tied to the continuing fallout surrounding young Dolph. Her name suddenly became part of the same dark conversation, even though she was an artist trying to build momentum in the rap scene. Reports said Desto was with a female friend when the incident happened. That detail only added to the shock, because it suggested how unpredictable and far-reaching the situation had become. At that stage, the violence wasn't just touching major street figures or rumored associates. It was now affecting up-and-coming talent too, people who are still in the process of making a name for themselves. The pattern was what made everything so chilling. One death was followed by another, then another. Each incident seemed to feed the narrative that retaliation was driving events behind the scenes, whether officially confirmed or not. Names connected to the city's rap world, street politics, and old alliances kept resurfacing in ways that were impossible to ignore.
For many watching from the outside, CEO Teezy's death stood out because of who he was alleged to be connected to. His name had already circulated heavily in conversations about Dolph's murder, so when he was found dead in that vehicle, people immediately saw it as more than just another case. It looked like another major piece in a much larger and more dangerous puzzle. Desto's killing made the situation feel even more disturbing. She represented a different side of the Memphis scene, fresh talent, ambition, and the possibility of something bigger ahead. Instead, her story was suddenly cut short, and her death became wrapped into the same atmosphere of fear, suspicion, and revenge that had already cast a shadow over the city. Taken together, these cases painted a bleak picture. The names changed, the locations changed, and the dates were different, but the underlying tension never seemed to disappear. Memphis was watching a conflict unfold in real time, and every new loss made it harder to believe anyone connected to that world was truly out of danger. What stood out most was how quickly hope kept getting replaced by another devastating update. Just when it seemed the worst might be over, another victim's name surfaced. In this ongoing war, the list just kept growing, and the message behind it was impossible to miss. The fallout from young Dolph's death was still reverberating, and it was leaving more tragedy in its wake. Around 2:40 in the morning on the 5500 block of Richmond Avenue, she stopped at a red light behind a dark four-door car. In an instant, the situation turned deadly. Two armed men stepped out of that vehicle and started shooting before she had any chance to react. She was struck several times and pronounced dead at the scene. The friend riding with her suffered serious injuries but lived.
News of the attack left people stunned. To many, it didn't immediately make sense. Why would anyone target a woman like Cash Desto, especially when she was not publicly known as a direct figure in young Dolph's killing? For a moment, the motive seemed unclear. The whole thing felt sudden, confusing, and deeply unsettling. Later, a detail surfaced that changed how many people looked at the case. Cash Desto's father was identified as Hernandez Govan, the man authorities accused of putting the plan together in the young Dolph case. That connection instantly transformed the shooting from a shocking mystery into something far more disturbing.
In 2017, someone shot at Dolph's SUV with over 100 bullets in Charlotte. Somehow, he survived. Later that same year, he was shot again in Los Angeles. He took 3 bullets and lived through it. But in 2021, outside the bakery he loved, there was no escape. Police launched an investigation. They used surveillance footage, cell phone records, and DNA to track down the suspects. 2 men were arrested. Their names were Justin Johnson and Cornelius Smith. Today, all of them are behind bars.
What first appeared random now looked tied to a much larger chain of events. After Govan was arrested, he posted a cryptic message online. Many people interpreted it as a possible sign that he believed his own decisions may have contributed to what happened to his daughter. It was a chilling development. Her death began to look less like an isolated act and more like the painful fallout of choices made long before that night ever began. The tragedy hit even harder because of what it seemed to represent. Cash Desto may not have been accused in Dolph's murder, yet she still became part of the aftermath surrounding it. In the eyes of many observers, she was pulled into a conflict that had already spiraled far beyond its original targets. The consequences were no longer confined to the people directly named in the case. They were spreading outward, touching anyone connected to the wrong name, the wrong relationship, or the wrong place at the wrong time. That realization added a new layer of fear to the story. It suggested that this wasn't chaos. It looked intentional, precise, measured. Every move seemed to send a message, and every new shooting made the situation feel more calculated than the last. Any uncertainty about how far this violence could reach started to disappear.
One name that soon entered the conversation was Tomuel Benson. By that point, it was becoming harder to see these incidents as separate episodes. Instead, they appeared to be pieces of a larger pattern, each one deepening the sense that the fallout from Dolph's death was still unfolding in real time. Yet the violence did not stop there. Another major incident followed on August 18, 2023. That day, the Memphis Police Department responded to a shooting at a BP gas station on South Parkway. By then, the pattern was impossible to ignore. What had started as one high-profile killing had expanded into a long trail of retaliation, suspicion, and devastating consequences. Each new case seemed to raise the stakes. Every shooting brought more questions, more pressure, and more attention to the people still left standing in the middle of it all. The city was watching as one event after another kept adding to a story that was already packed with grief, tension, and unanswered questions. What made it all even more disturbing was the way these incidents appeared connected through relationships rather than direct accusations. In cases like this, a person didn't always have to be the main target to become vulnerable. Sometimes simply being close to the wrong individual was enough to place them in danger. That possibility gave the entire situation a darker edge. By the time police arrived at the BP station shooting in August, it was clear this was no longer just about one event from the past. The ripple effects were still active, and the names involved continued to draw attention for all the wrong reasons. With every new development, the story became less about a single crime and more about the continuing fallout surrounding everyone linked to it. And that is what made this stretch of events so alarming. It wasn't just the scale of the violence. It was the sense that the consequences were unfolding step by step, with each incident feeding into the next. What happened on Richmond Avenue was shocking on its own. Once the connection to Hernandez Govan became public, it took on an even heavier meaning. And when another shooting followed months later at the BP on South Parkway, the message was hard to miss. This chain of events was still far from over. At roughly 9:30 in the morning, responders arrived to a grim scene. A man was found on the ground, having suffered a fatal gunshot injury. Authorities later identified him as T. Manuel Benson, the brother of Black youngster. What made the case even more unsettling was how openly it appeared to happen. The person responsible was not described as someone who tried to stay hidden or avoid attention. In the middle of the day, the act was carried out in a way that suggested little fear of being seen or recognized. Investigators moved quickly, and police soon released a clearer image of the suspect to the public. Along with that image, they announced a $5,000 reward for information that could help lead to an arrest. News of T. Manuel's death spread fast and hit the city hard. It was the kind of story that immediately grabbed attention, especially because of the name connected to it. Yet for many people who had followed the history surrounding Black Youngster, the tragedy also felt tied to a much longer and darker chain of events. For years, Black Youngster had been known as one of Young Dolph's most outspoken rivals. Their issues were not a secret, and the tension between the two camps had played out publicly again and again. One of the biggest moments in that feud came in 2017, when Black Youngster was arrested in connection with an attempt on Young Dolph's life. In that incident, more than 100 rounds were fired at Dolph's bulletproof SUV.
Even though Black Youngster ultimately beat those charges, the conflict did not disappear. The hostility stayed alive, and the feud continued to grow in the public eye. Diss tracks added fuel to it. Social media posts kept the pressure on. At nearly every turn, there seemed to be another jab, another insult, or another reminder that the tension had never truly cooled off. Over time, that kind of public back and forth became part of the image. It turned personal conflict into entertainment for spectators watching from the outside. People saw the posts, heard the music, and followed the drama as if it were just another chapter in rap rivalry. Behind all of that, though, was a much more serious reality, one with consequences that did not stay online and did not end when the cameras were off. Tamanuel Benson's killing forced that reality into the spotlight once again. This was no longer just about lyrics, online taunts, or old grudges being recycled for attention. This was a loss inside Black Youngster's own family. The same atmosphere of retaliation and hostility that had surrounded so much of that history now felt painfully close to home. There is something especially heavy about seeing a cycle return in that way. When conflict is fed for years, it can start to feel distant, almost unreal to the people watching it unfold from their phones. Yet moments like this strip away that illusion. Suddenly, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. A brother is gone. A family is left dealing with grief. A city is reminded once again how quickly old tensions can lead to irreversible pain. For many observers, that was the hardest part to look away from. The very kind of violence that had once been referenced, celebrated, or used as fuel in a broader rap war had now touched Black Youngster in the most personal way possible. What had long been part of a public feud was no longer something happening to somebody else. It was at his own doorstep.
In the end, Tamanuel's death was more than another shocking headline. It became a harsh reminder of what these long-running conflicts can leave behind when they spiral beyond music and internet drama. What once looked like provocation and performance had turned into real heartbreak. And for Black Youngster, it was a devastating reality he could no longer keep at a distance. Pressure was closing in from every direction. Big Juke and Yo Gotti may have believed they were beyond reach in the middle of this bitter feud, yet people around Dolph were signaling something very different. One by one, many of the names tied to Dolph's killing were already dealing with serious fallout. For a time, Gotti seemed to avoid any direct response, almost as if he had somehow stayed outside the storm. Still, that sense of safety didn't last. As the situation unfolded, it started to look like PRE had no intention of letting anything slide. The pattern was hard to ignore. Several people connected to that circle had already been touched by the consequences, and it gave the impression that the pressure was moving higher and higher. The warning behind it all felt unmistakable. If your name was linked in any way to Dolph's death, eventually the tension would reach you too. What made the whole situation even more unsettling was how close it allegedly came to home. Reports suggested the conflict didn't stop with the usual figures people expected. Even family members were set to be in the line of danger. Gotti's mother was reportedly targeted at one point, a detail that shocked a lot of people because it showed just how far things had escalated. Fortunately, she was able to get away safely. Big Juke, however, didn't get that same outcome.
That's where the story takes an especially grim turn. The most haunting part of Big Juke's death wasn't just who he was or what people believed he represented. It was where it happened. He wasn't at a nightclub. He wasn't out on the block. He wasn't visiting one of the places people might associate with street politics. Instead, he was attending a funeral, there to honor someone close to him. That detail changed everything about how the moment was viewed. Funerals are supposed to be sacred. They're places where families gather, where grief takes center stage, where even long-running tensions are expected to pause, at least for a moment. Yet in this case, even that setting reportedly offered no protection. The fact that such a deeply personal and emotional occasion became the backdrop for what happened made the entire situation feel colder, darker, and far more disturbing. For many observers, it reinforced the idea that this conflict had moved past ordinary boundaries a long time ago.
He a hater, you know what I mean? Matter of fact, he my biggest hater. You know what I mean? He wanted to sign me. He wanted me to come over there and let him give me some money, give me a car and all that. Nah, I don't need that. I got my own ice, real ice. You know what I mean? They rocking that fake ice. Like I get real ice. I be trying not to do too much stunting and flexing and talking too much because I make rappers feel uncomfortable.
Nothing seemed off limits anymore. Not reputation, not status, not even family. The people believed to be seeking payback appeared willing to send a message in the harshest possible way. Nobody connected to the situation could assume they were safe, no matter where they were or what they were doing. Big Jug's death carried a heavy sense of irony because of that. A man who may have thought the danger was reserved for certain places or certain moments reportedly encountered it in a setting where most people would never expect it. That contrast made the story hit even harder. It wasn't just about retaliation anymore. It was about how unpredictable and all-consuming the fallout had become.
Seen from a wider angle, the moment also fed the growing belief that the people around Dolph were acting with patience, not randomness. It seemed less like isolated incidents and more like a deliberate progression. First, others in the wider orbit faced consequences. After that, attention appeared to shift toward the names viewed as more central. If that interpretation was accurate, then Big Juke's death wasn't just another headline. It was being read as part of a larger chain of events that had been building for some time. That's what made the atmosphere around all of this so intense. Every new development seemed to confirm that old alliances, old grudges, and old accusations were still driving everything forward. No one could count on status or distance to keep them insulated forever. So even if Gotti had seemed untouched for a while, the events around him suggested that the pressure was getting closer and closer. And in the middle of all of it, Big Juke became the clearest example that this feud had reached a terrifying level, one where even a funeral could become the setting for a moment that sent shockwaves through everyone watching. In that world, nobody was ever truly protected. No gathering was untouchable, and no moment was off limits. When fate comes calling, it doesn't wait for the setting to feel appropriate. Reports say both Big Juke and Yo Gotti were present at the funeral for their family member, OG Eric Bolden. Footage later circulated from YouTube journalist Seti Nash, showing the two men inside the service near the casket. On the surface, it looked like a solemn family moment. Yet behind that scene, something far more unsettling was unfolding without most people realizing it.
Tucked away toward the rear of the church, two men were allegedly keeping close watch on Big Juke. They weren't there by accident. According to the account, they stayed in the background, studied his movements, and waited. Every step, every pause, every transition mattered. They were looking for the right opening, and they didn't act inside the church. That chance reportedly came later, at the repast following the service. Yo Gotti was not there for that part of the gathering. Some believe his presence could have changed the situation, or possibly made it even more chaotic. Either way, he was absent. Big Juke, however, did attend. The setting shifted from a funeral service to Piranha's Restaurant and Event Center on Winchester Road, which should have remained a time for mourning and family fellowship, instead turned into the moment everything changed. Once Big Juke made his way outside and got into his vehicle, the waiting was over. That is when the attackers allegedly moved in. As soon as he was seated inside the car, gunfire erupted. The vehicle was struck repeatedly in a sudden and overwhelming burst. It happened fast, with almost no time to react. One claim says Yo Gotti's mother may have been inside the vehicle as well. Even with that possibility, the assault still went forward. Amid the chaos, she reportedly survived. Big Juke did not have the same outcome. Emergency help came and he was taken to the hospital, but the damage was too severe. Despite those efforts, he did not survive. What makes the story hit even harder is the timing. This wasn't some late-night encounter on an empty street. It followed a funeral. It came after a family had already gathered to grieve one loss, only for another devastating event to unfold before the day was truly over. That detail is what gives the whole situation such a chilling weight.
The image people remember now is no longer just the funeral clip of Big Juke and Yo Gotti standing near the casket for OG Eric Bolden. It's the idea that even during that deeply personal moment, eyes may already have been locked on Juke, tracking him, waiting for the next move. What appeared to be a quiet scene of mourning may have also been the beginning of a deadly setup. According to the version of events being discussed, The church was not where the plan would unfold. The repast became the point where the opportunity finally opened up. From there, everything happened in a rush. A parking area outside a restaurant, a vehicle door closing, a sudden attack, a hospital trip that ended in tragedy. Whether people saw the warning signs at the time or not, the story now feels grim in hindsight. What seemed like a day centered on remembrance reportedly became the setting for surveillance, pursuit, and a final, devastating outcome. Big Juke went from attending a relative's funeral to becoming the next name tied to heartbreak before the day was done. That is why this case continues to draw so much attention. It wasn't only the loss itself, it was the shocking sequence of events, the location, the timing, and the idea that the suspects may have been watching long before anyone understood what was coming. Security cameras later picked up a white SUV racing away, and the vehicle didn't appear to have any license plates. From that moment, many people saw the incident as deliberate rather than random. In the eyes of the public, the motive didn't seem hard to guess.
Big Juke was more than just Yo Gotti's brother. His name had also become tied to the tension that exploded after young Dolph's death. Following that tragedy, he developed a reputation for publicly taking shots at Dolph's side. Online and in videos, he was seen mocking Dolph's artists and showing off his lifestyle in ways many viewers took as disrespectful. To a lot of people watching from the outside, his attitude suggested he had no sympathy for what had happened. One moment in particular drew even more attention. Video surfaced that appeared to show him disrespecting a mural created in Dolph's honor. That clip only intensified the belief that this feud ran far deeper than ordinary rap rivalry. It looked personal, bitter, and impossible to ignore. What pushed suspicion even further, though, was the network of names surrounding him. Not long after Dolph was killed, PRE affiliate Grove Hero went online and directly called Big Juke out. He publicly accused Juke of being the person who allegedly placed a $40,000 bounty tied to Dolph's killing. Those claims spread fast, and they immediately added another layer to an already explosive situation. Grove Hero didn't stop at accusations. He also made it known that if he ever crossed paths with Juke, the confrontation would be immediate. That statement only added more fuel to a story that was already surrounded by anger, grief, and retaliation. By the time news of Juke's own death broke, people across social media were already piecing together their own theories. Naturally, many began linking the two cases. For those who had followed the fallout from Dolph's death, Juke's name had been circling the conversation for a long time. His public behavior, the accusations made against him, and the people he was seen around all combined to create a picture that many believed was too significant to dismiss.
Even before this latest tragedy, Big Juke had already been associated in the public eye with several figures reportedly connected to Dolph's killing. One of the most talked about examples was footage showing him spending time with CEO Teezy, a man who had also been mentioned in discussions surrounding the case. That appearance didn't prove anything by itself, but in a situation already packed with suspicion, every connection carried weight. Taken together, those details are why so many people immediately started drawing lines between the two events. A plateless white SUV fleeing the area, a man long accused online of having deeper ties to Dolph's death, public disrespect that kept old wounds open, and visible links to names that had already surfaced in the wider story. None of that stayed in the background for long. As the footage spread and the timeline came under more scrutiny, the reaction was intense. To many observers, this didn't feel like an isolated act. It looked like another chapter in a conflict that had already left a major mark on Memphis rap. Whether those suspicions ultimately hold up is a separate question, but the reason people were talking was obvious. Big Juke had spent years being viewed as one of the loudest figures on one side of that divide. Because of that, when his name became the center of another shocking headline, the internet responded exactly how you would expect. People revisited old clips, resurfaced past allegations, and pointed back to every statement and every appearance that seemed to connect him to the earlier tragedy. That is why, once the surveillance footage emerged, the conversation moved instantly from shock to suspicion. For many, the scene, the history, and the timing all seemed to fit into a much bigger story that had been building for years. Dolph's killing cast a long shadow, and his name kept surfacing alongside people already under intense scrutiny. Photos also linked him to Hernandez Govin, the person investigators believe was behind the plot from the very beginning. Once those connections became public, the pressure around him started to grow fast.
In that kind of situation, every association matters. Each image, each relationship, and each public link adds another layer to the story. What may have once looked like casual ties suddenly carried far more weight, especially as authorities continued piecing together what happened. Since then, the fallout has only deepened. Several individuals reportedly connected to Dolph's case have also faced serious consequences, and that pattern has drawn even more attention to everyone still tied to the investigation. As more names enter the spotlight, the group at the center of it all appears to be shrinking. Taken together, it paints a tense picture. The net around this case seems to be tightening, and with every new development, the focus grows sharper on those believed to have played a role.